well, it is 5:32, so we will just continue having people trickle on. But just to get us started with our event tonight, my name is Blair Barasa, and I'd love to welcome you to our Taking Pride in Mental Health event. We're so excited for this event and excited that you all are joining us tonight. And we have a really wonderful presentation and panel discussion lined up for you. So I'm very excited to get us started. Just a little bit of information. I'm representing the Connectedness Coalition tonight. And Connectedness is funded by the Orange County Healthcare Agency, Behavioral Health Services, Prevention and Intervention, and the Mental Health Services Act, Prop 63. So really the purpose of our coalition is to be a community of mental health providers and agencies, colleges and universities, and mental health peer leaders and advocates dedicated to improving the system of mental health care for transitional aged youth and young adults in Orange County. So that's really kind of that 16 to 24-year-old demographic. So we're focused on aligning existing efforts, fostering collaboration, expanding referral pathways, and also stigma reduction, which is why we have events like this to try and bring light to different topics within the space of mental health and hopefully reduce stigma and reduce any fear about seeking help for your mental health, because it's so important to do that. And we want everyone to feel encouraged to do that. So that is a little bit about who we are as an organization and what our goal is tonight. Additionally, just a couple of announcements. We will be having a survey at the end of this event. So for those who fill it out, you will receive an Amazon gift card. So it's not that you will be entered into a drawing for one. You'll just receive one if you fill it out. So we would greatly appreciate your support in doing that. I will be posting the link in the chat conversation so that you can access it there multiple times throughout the event. And again, at the end, I'll provide another reminder to fill out the survey and do that to help us out. We would really appreciate it. And then one last disclaimer before we really launch into the presentation. As we're having this panel discussion, we have different panelists who are representing different organizations, but every opinion shared here tonight is really the opinion of that panelist. It doesn't necessarily reflect on the organization with which they're affiliated. So just to put that out there so that we're all on the same page. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our host, Marissa, who's going to introduce themselves, and we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good evening today. My name is Marissa Munoz. My pronouns are they, she. I've been an intern with Connectedness since last October. It's been a while. I'm super excited to host this event as a queer person myself, and I'm super excited to have this conversation. I think this conversation is super important to have, considering that, this community does face different challenges, different obstacles when it comes to mental health and experiences throughout life that really do affect mental health differently than perhaps other people who are not part of this community. So it is really important to highlight that and to really discuss the positives of what could come out of really taking care of our mental health in the queer community. So that's really important. So now I'll go ahead and give it up for our panelists. We're really excited for them, and see if y'all can give us a brief introduction of of yourselves. How about we start with Stephen?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us here on this webinar. My name is Stephen Lambert. Pronouns are he, him, and I'm the coordinator of prevention education over at the Orange County Department of Education. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. Should I popcorn, or are you gonna?
Oh yeah, you can popcorn if you like. That's totally fine.
I'll popcorn Mac.
Hi, y'all. Can y'all hear me? I hope so. My name is Mac. My pronouns are they, them. I'm 22 and I live in Long Beach. I am a community organizer within Long Beach. I have done a lot of things within KGA and GSA Network, as well as some things with the LGBT Center at Long Beach. So hi, nice to meet y'all. I'll popcorn to Addie.
Said Addie, right? Well, too bad I'm next. Hi, everyone. I'm really honored and excited to be here. My name is Adriel, or Adriel, or Addie. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm 24. I live in the city of Compton, and I am here not necessarily repping, but I'm here for the LGBT in Long Beach Center. And yeah, it's the organization I'm affiliated with. And yeah, thank you. I'll popcorn it to, let's see, Randy.
Hey y'all, my name is Randy Rodriguez. I'm 26 years old. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles, and I am affiliated with the Cypress Community College Queer Straight Alliance. So I started as a member there back in 2019, and then I became VP, and then most recently served as president. I did graduate last semester, so we're kind of just like in this transitory phase of trying to, put someone else in that position, but still doing a lot of work together, and so grateful and happy to be a part of this and to hopefully create some knowledge and learn from y'all as well. So I will popcorn Cleo.
Hey y'all, how are y'all? Cleo Ray, I'm here with APAT, and I'm the behavioral health therapist. And I will do Stephanie.
Hello everyone. My name is Stephanie Nojosa. My pronouns are she, her. I attend Cal State Long Beach. I will be a third year this upcoming fall semester. I'm majoring in social work and minoring in sociology. This past year, I've been working as a peer mentor in the counseling department at my school, and most of my work really revolves around first generation students and the LGBT community.
Thank you all so much for those brief introductions. We're really excited to start this conversation. And now that it is time, we will start this conversation now off with Stephen, who's going to be giving us a presentation today to start off this discussion. Yeah, take it away, Stephen, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Get the screen share going. All right. I believe this is displaying correctly. It's always a roll of the dice. But thank you again for having me here. Again, my name is Stephen, and I work over at the Orange County Department of Education. And tonight, what I'm going to be talking to you about is something called the California Healthy Kids Survey, and looking at some student data around LGBTQ student mental wellness. And I know that since this is a population this is a TAY coalition and a TAY group, it's like the first half of TAY, I guess. So just keep in mind, although the student data is among middle and high school students, many of these data points, have an effect as young people continue to develop into the young adulthood. And anyways, that's my preface. Let's jump right in. So what we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to start by explaining kind of what is this? What is the Healthy Kids Survey? What's in it? Why is it important to look at disparities? We'll talk a little bit about that. How are LGBTQ students doing? And then finally, what's next? What do we do with some of this info as we sort of transition into the panel discussion? So without further ado, what is the Healthy Kids Survey? Or you'll sometimes hear chicks or checks. So the California Healthy Kids Survey is a survey that's administered to students in 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grade and alternative and continuation schools about every 2 years. Some schools do it every year. And it measures a bunch of things. I shouldn't say a few. There are 3 areas in which the survey is gathering information. Number 1, school supports and engagement. Number 2, safety, bullying, and violence. Then finally, substance use and mental health. So let me give you just a couple examples so that you can see kind of, what sort of questions are on this survey. So for school supports and engagement, one of the questions that you'll find in there is about something called school connectedness. And you'll see something that says, how strongly do you agree or disagree with the following statements? I feel close to people at this school. I'm happy to be at this school. Teachers at this school treat students fairly. And so we're trying to get a picture of, what's it like to be a student at a given school? Do you feel engaged? Do you feel like part of the school community? The second category, again, being safety, bullying, and violence. This is an example of a question you find in there is, during the past year, the past 12 months, how many times on school property have you been afraid of being beaten up, been in a physical fight, those sorts of things? So related to bullying, to fighting. And then finally, substance use and mental health. So there's a bunch of questions in this one, but one of the examples is about chronic sadness. So during the past 12 months, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more that you stopped doing some usual activities? So what you could call it a depressive episode, right? So I'm not going to sit here and read all like 100-something questions to you, because we all want to be done before midnight. So let me just continue. So as we're thinking about the survey, again, these are the 3 categories. And as I dive into some of the data, sort of be thinking about how do these different areas intersect, and how do they, how do they relate to one another, particularly when we get into some of the information about LGBTQ students and their experiences. So on that note, why do we look at disparities? And before we even look at them, I kind of want to start with a definition. So for all of you, whether you're panelists or attendees, if you could go ahead and in the chat, could you place in, how would you define disparities? So what's your definition of a disparity or disparities? And then why do you think that they exist? Why do you think that disparities exist? So go ahead and put that in there. I'll kind of look through those as I click through the next few slides and kind of highlight some of the responses there. But I welcome your participation. So as you're doing that, I do want to share, it was funny because Blair said, oh, the panelists, all of their statements don't reflect the, the position of their agencies, except Stevens, which is true. And I wanted to share that our vision at OCDE is that Orange County students will lead the nation in college and career readiness and success. But really, what does that mean, right? What does success mean? And does success look the same for every student, for every young person? And it's so important to remember that not all students or young people have the same experiences or the same needs, right? Our family, our culture, our gender identity, sexual orientation can affect drastically the way that we're treated by teachers, by counselors, by our peers, by the community, by society at large. And so it's so important that we don't assume one size fits all, and that we, tailor the way that we do business in schools to reflect that, and in the community. This is kind of technical, but some of you probably have heard of social determinants of health. This is another reason why we look at disparities and looking in differences in the experiences of young people based on their characteristics and their communities, right? Because where you grow up, where you're born, the economic opportunities that you have, race, ethnicity, national origin, all of these things can affect your ability to live a healthy and successful life through no action of your own, right? Oh, thank you. I'm seeing some responses come in about disparities. Yes, so those key differences, the big differences, right? The ones that are so visible, whether we're talking about our access to healthcare services or we're talking about the quality of our education. So thank you for those responses. And why we at OCDE look at these differences is because it's becoming increasingly clear to a lot of people that health and wellness is incredibly important for student success. You can't address learning and academics without first meeting the needs of students. Students have other priorities. And if we want them to be motivated to do work or to even come to school to show up, we need to make that a welcoming environment, and we need to meet those other needs in a way that's responsive, culturally responsive. So I hope that I've made the case for why it's important to look at data and to see if students are having different experiences on campus and in the community. So let's find out. So how are LGBTQ students doing? The data that I'm going to be sharing, again, from the California Healthy Kids Survey, is coming from the 2017 and 2018 data set, because the latest data is still being processed. It's every 2 years. We had some setbacks because of the pandemic. But what you're going to see is data pulled from 7th through 11th grade, again, including non-traditional continuation schools, from about over 80,000 students in 21 districts. So basically all of the districts that have those grade levels, with only 3 exceptions, participate in the survey. So we're able to get a good idea of kind of what's going on throughout the county. So let's jump right in. So in the first category being school supports and engagement, right? Do we have a good school community here? And does every student feel like they're a part of that community? So the first category here is high caring adult relationships at school. And so for this, we're asking questions like, at my school, do you agree with this? At my school, there's a teacher or some other adult who really cares about me and notices when I'm not there and listens to me. And so you could see here, as we go through, the orange bars reflect LGBT students' responses, and then the gray bars reflect students who do not identify as LGBT. So in here, you can see slightly lower, very close, but a slightly lower percentage of LGBT students saying, yes, I have high caring relationships at my school. The second area is high expectations of adults. So at my school, there's a teacher or adult who tells me when I do a good job, who always wants me to do my best, who checks on me and believes that I'm going to be successful. And so you can see here, unfortunately, we're starting to see a little bit of a difference here, right? That LGBT students feel less strongly that they have those caring, that they have the high expectations at school. And then finally, something called school connectedness. So for this one, we're asking questions. I mentioned this earlier, like I feel close to people at the school. I feel like I'm part of it. I'm treated fairly. I feel safe here at my school. And unfortunately, you can see sort of the biggest gap so far here, where only about a third of students who identify as LGBT saying, I feel connected to my school. I feel like I'm part of the school community. And that's concerning, right? Especially when we talk about where students are able to make connections to peers and make connections to caring adults, right? We want them there at the school, and we want that to be a supportive environment for them. Okay. The second category is safety, bullying, and violence. So the first few category items here are going to be talking about safety in general. So do you feel safe or very safe when you're at school? Again, you see a kind of a large separation here, right? Between LGBT students and those who do not identify, 46% versus 65. And then we talk about some of the more specific ones, right? So have you been afraid of being beaten up at school in the last year? And you can see roughly double. So 1 in 4 LGBT students saying, I have felt this way in the last 12 months. And then finally, have you been threatened with harm or injury on school campus in the last year? You can see 18% versus 7%. So of course, very concerning and frankly upsetting. And then the second category I wanted to talk about was bullying and harassment. So we've talked a little bit about safety and your perception of, do I feel safe at school? Let's talk about this. So I've actually just included a few of the items that relate to discrimination. So of course, there are different types of bullying, but these are all relevant to your demographic characteristics, right? So you can actually see here that 23% of students identifying as LGBT report experiencing bullying and harassment because of their race, ethnicity, or national origin. And this really connects to the whole idea of intersectionality, right? And that being a person of color and being someone who identifies as LGBTQ carries with it different experiences than even just being a member of one of those communities, right? Because of your gender, you see a 4-to-1 difference in experiencing of bullying and harassment, and being bullied because of sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation as well is a drastic difference between those who identify and those who do not. And then finally, violent incidents. So have you been pushed, shoved, slapped, hit, or kicked by someone not in a joking way? So a serious conflict. Again, you see an increase there, more LGBT students reporting that they did experience that. The same for being in a physical fight. And finally, being threatened or injured with a weapon, which is a roughly 3 times as much in terms of frequency. And thankfully, the number is still low, but unacceptably high. It's unacceptably high to see that. So to sort of summarize that section, LGBTQ students are significantly more likely to feel unsafe at school and to experience harassment, bullying, and violence on campus. And I mean, aside from mental well-being, this has implications for school discipline, right? Because if there's a fight on campus, sometimes it's not just the aggressor who experiences consequences, unfortunately. And so this is a big issue with a lot of moving parts. So the last category that I'm going to talk about for survey results is substance use and mental health, right? This is really kind of where we wanted to go with the discussion But I felt that it was important to present some of those upstream factors, right? Some of the contributors that may affect young people's mental well-being and lead to some of these symptoms. So as far as substance use goes, they're among LGBT students, they're roughly twice as likely to be vaping, so using e-cigarettes in the last month. A little over twice as likely to have used marijuana in the past month. And for binge drinking, a little more, so 12% versus 4%. Now, whenever I present this data, I always have to give the biggest asterisk and warning because it is very easy to look at these statistics and then further stigmatize members of the LGBTQ community. But it's important to remember, look at those percentages, right? Most LGBTQ students and young people do not use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. They are still making healthy choices. We need to affirm and recognize that and not look at these numbers and start to make assumptions and further stigmatize young people. And really remembering that access to services is key, right? If we do see those increased rates of substance use, we need to make sure that whoever is out there, whether it be counselors or, treatment programs, that we all have training, that we're providing services in a culturally responsive way, not to be identifying LGBTQ students as potential substance users, right? Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. Mental health symptoms. Okay, so the first question here is, during the past month, have you missed school for either feeling sad, hopeless, anxious, stressed, or angry, or not feeling safe at school? And you can see here 3 times the rate of missing school for that reason, simply not feeling safe and in a good headspace to come to class, right? The second question is, during the past year, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more? Stop doing some usual activities. And you can see here a very concerning and drastic difference between LGBTQ students and those who do not identify. And finally, and very concerningly, around suicide ideation. So have you seriously considered suicide in the last year? And you can see almost triple the percentage of students who identify as LGBT saying, yes, I have considered this in the last 12 months. And, all right, let me set my timer here. So the last kind of area here is the overlay, right? How do mental health and substance use connect to one another? So stay with me because this one's a little complicated. So among students, this next chart only relates to LGBT students. So the gray bar doesn't mean not identifying as LGBT anymore. So the blue bars represent LGBT students who say, I have used any sort of alcohol or other drug in the past month. And then the gray bars represent LGBT students saying, I have not used alcohol and other drugs. So you can see here with these 2 graphs that students who report, I have used substances, also report very high levels of those mental health symptoms, right? So we kind of intuitively know those things are connected, but when you see it laid out for you and you understand that 3/4 of the students who said they had used substances are also saying they've had chronic sadness, that means that we need to be very thoughtful in our referrals, and even out in the community with our family and friends, right? If our family and friends are, increasing their substance use, we need to be looking a lot more carefully for the signs, right? The signs of depression, et cetera. So again, to sum it up, LGBTQ students are significantly more likely to experience chronic sadness and suicidal thoughts. But what is next? What do we do with that? And the first thing I would say is really to take a deep breath. Like when I first saw the findings, it broke my heart to see a lot of these statistics and to know these experiences that so many young people are having. But it's also important to stay centered and remember, are these problems or are they symptoms? And in a lot of cases, these aren't the problems of the individual. It's a symptom of a broken society. The consequences of the way that these students are treated by the community at large. And that's where we need to start work, right? That's where the work needs to happen. And also to build community. I know Blair had mentioned earlier that, you're not alone, right? There is some solace in knowing that many other people are struggling with these issues and confronting them. And really the last thing there is to focus on resilience, right? Uh, before we go any further, I meant to do this earlier. I hope you'll indulge me in doing a really quick breathing activity. I swear it's literally 30 seconds. So you're going to see a bubble pop up in front of you, and it's sort of going to pulse, and it'll cue you to breathe in and to breathe out. So as the little dot goes around the circle, just breathe in, and then the text will prompt you to breathe out. So I hope that you'll indulge me with that. I'm really into the the breath. So stay with me. Let's hope that this video plays correctly. All right. And that was just 3 quick breaths. But for me, it really helps me stay centered, because I don't know, I have found that that's so helpful for me. But I really wanted to end on really focusing on resilience, because I think it's so important we don't forget that many LGBTQ youth are thriving in the face of adversity. So we need to keep our focus on those young people, lift them up, and let them know that they're not invisible, and that we need to elevate those voices and hear what is working and how are you able to thrive and succeed. And so that is all I have for my presentation. I hope that you found it interesting. I'm going to stick around, so I'll be here to answer any questions that anyone has, but I believe I'll pass it back to Marissa.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Stephen. Your presentation was really easy to follow and really informative. I really enjoyed it. And now we're going to start the panel discussion part of this event. So we are going to start off with asking Cleo some questions. So the first question that we have for you is going to be, having reflected on the disparities and, you know, just reflecting on what Stephen just presented, how have you seen the personal side of these disparities pop up in counseling, and just overall your general thoughts on his presentation?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for the press, by the way. I wanted more than just the 3, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. I would say definitely the disparities in terms of substance use, in terms of the anxiety, as well as the depressive, and also the suicidality, right? So I would say that for my clients who are youth and who are LGBTQ, it's a lot higher. And I would definitely say it's because of the different types of issues that they face at school, but also like in society as well, right? Because we live in a very connected world, like it's not just bullying at school anymore, like it's bullying online. And I find that that is kind of something that lingers after school as well. So it's kind of like the person's not just getting bullied at school, but also when they leave school. So it makes it harder for them to cope with consistent bullying, right? And it's sad. It's sad that it's when still going on, and it's sad that a lot of youth still don't feel seen or heard, and are feeling maybe invalidated either at school or at home. Yeah. And I think that if anything, one thing that Stephanie mentioned is that like feeling connected is very powerful because it grounds them, right? It helps them to keep moving, knowing that they have someone who they can talk to, who they do feel heard by, and who feel seen as well. So I think that when it comes to youth and when it comes to people who are facing adversities and who are experiencing these disparities on a very personal level, it's important to have that connectedness and to make sure that they do have, you know, maybe a person at school, a counselor or a teacher or administrative person who they can go to, so they can like feel like they matter and that they are cared for. because they may not have it at home, and if they do, it's always good to have it at school because they spend a good amount of time at school as well. So I think both places are always good to have that compassionate person and that ear to have as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you actually touched on the next question that we had for you, which was, where do you see the need for more support and or services? And like you were saying, you would think that they would need it more in school as well as home and not just in one place, because school and home, when we're youth, right, is where the majority of our days are. You're not at school, you're at home. And if you're not at home, you're at school. So yeah. And
Yeah. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no problem. Did you have more to say on that?
So I was going to go back to, I'm sorry, I was going to go to the next question about
Oh, of course.
services.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of things that we need more of, definitely when it comes to mental health, we need more therapists and psychiatrists who are affirming to our LGBTQ youth. It's so hard to find a therapist, it's so hard to find a psychiatrist that doesn't like pathologize people who are LGBTQ. Also housing, it's so important that we have more housing for LGBTQ youth who are homeless, and also people who are LGBTQ who are experiencing intimate partner violence or domestic violence. We don't have those shelters in Orange County or even in LA County, really, shelters that are just for people who are LGBTQ who experience homelessness or people who are experiencing IPV or intimate partner violence. So those are things that we need more of or don't even have and just need it. And substance use, definitely more programs that are for LGBTQ people who are experiencing substance use, and peer groups who are also just connecting with each other who have been using substances. We need more peer groups. Also just spaces where that are not centered around alcohol, like more queer spaces that don't have alcohol, alternative spaces outside of like clubs or bars, or just any social spaces that just don't have substances. And the last thing I have on here is medical services that are trans affirming, that are queer affirming. So a person can go in and get a mammogram and not have to worry about like, oh, is it okay if I'm trans? Like a pap smear, oh, is it okay if I'm trans? They can just simply go in and get what they need and get out without any hassle, without being traumatized, and feel like they are being taken care of and not, being triggered by different types of discrimination or prejudice.
Most definitely, yes. And that also can lead us into our next question, which would be, what are some of your favorite, if you have any, mental health resources / services, personally and only directed to the LGBTQ plus folks in the community?
Yeah, so I would say definitely the centers in Long Beach, centers in LA, centers in Orange County, my agency. So APIT, the agency that I work for, has been doing work for the past few decades, since the 80s. And we came about because we saw that in our community, like the Asian API population was not represented when it came to the HIV/AIDS data and research. And so our agency was created because there was not that representation. And so from there on, we have been building out our services. We've been expanding to substance use, to mental health, to housing, trying to make sure that our community, not just people who are impacted by AIDS or HIV, but also those who are just LGBTQ, have the needs and resources and they're being met. And so I have noticed that when Orange County, like there are programs, right, and agencies that do great work and they have the best of intentions. And also we need more, like it's not enough. And I personally don't see my face when I hear about these services in Orange County. And most of the providers are cisgender or they're fair skinned, right? And so as this like Black, queer, trans, non-binary, feminine person, like having more representation among providers in Orange County can also be a really good benefit, because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person, you know. And I know that when I was first came to Orange County, like I went all the way to LA just to get my services because I definitely felt more seen, I felt more represented, and I felt safer in a space that had those different qualities and those different aspects. So I think that's really important, just maybe not even Orange County, but definitely in Orange County because I live here right now. And also like there's just some things that a person can't be taught that they can't get from a workshop or a training, or, you know, watch a docuseries or whatever the case may be. Like lived experience is lived, right? There's some things that you just can't get that's like taught or like listened to, like you just have to live it. You've navigated it, you carried it, you struggle with it, you wake up with it. There's just some things that you just live and breathe through, right? And so I think that representation brings that experience, and it's important to have that when it comes to consumers, so that way they feel that connection and they feel like they can be cared for on a very fundamental and basic level, for sure.
Yeah, that is all super important and a super agree from me. And now we're going to move on to the next question, which you actually did start to touch on, which was the process of finding a therapist and really getting into therapy and for an LGBTQ person. And really, I think it's already hard to find a therapist probably, you know, without being LGBTQ, finding a therapist that is right for you, that fits, that you really feel comfortable with. So I have to say it's probably a lot harder, you know, when you're not cisgender or straight or either of those. And so how important do you think it is that LGBTQ youth are able to find a therapist that is gender affirming and who won't make invalidating comments? And how would you give tips on how to approach that and how to approach finding a therapist that's a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, basic answer is crucial, right? It's so important to have an affirming therapist. It's so important to have someone who is validating, right? Who makes those validating affirmations. Like no one wants to be re-traumatized or validated or to have to educate, you know, the basics of their identity, right? And it's pretty challenging. It's pretty challenging. So I've heard, and also I've experienced that. Like I still don't have my own therapist. My supervisor's always like, "Have you gotten one? Have you gotten one?" And it hasn't happened yet, but I'm still hopeful. So I would say the three key aspects are accessible, affordable, and affirming, right? So those are the main things that you want to look for when looking for a therapist. Are they accessible? Can you easily go to them, either in person or virtually? Are they affordable? Can you actually afford their services? And then last but not least, affirming. Like, will this person actually affirm you as a whole being? And the way I like to say is that you approach this process kind of like dating, right? You're shopping around, asking those awkward but necessary questions. And, you know, like, don't be afraid to say like, hey, like this actually isn't a good match. You know, don't be afraid to walk away, because it's all about like your well-being and feeling safe and making sure that you can come and just kind of like just use that space for what it is, for processing, for just breaking down if you have to, or just feeling connected and sharing that space with someone. So it's very important to like find that person who fits, if not 100%, then very close, like 75 and up. You know, you have to really consider all aspects of your being and bringing all of yourself into the room. And can you be comfortable with that person, sharing those parts of yourself with that person? You know, are there important things that this provider may not understand on a very fundamental level? And if so, like, what are they? And are there something that you want to compromise, or are they really important to you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I really like that you said, you know, finding a therapist is also not having, maybe we don't want to educate them, right, on our entire existence, our entire being, because I think a lot of the times cis folk or straight folk are expecting us, right? Oh, well, can you teach me? Can you tell me? You know, and it's like, well, maybe you can do your own research too. You know, there is Google out there and a lot of other great resources where you can learn. And, you know, we're not here to teach you how to respect us, right? You can do it if you want. I completely agree with that. And I really, yeah, accessible, affordable, and affirming. I really like that. I'm gonna start using that. The three A's. All right. And now, so what are some common themes that you encounter in counseling LGBTQ folk?
Well, I wish we had all day.
Right. Loaded question.
There's a lot to unpack. A lot of unpacking happens for sure. Well, okay, so I would say definitely communication. Communication is like a huge thing. And unfortunately, like we weren't all taught how to effectively communicate. And along with communication, consent. I think that's something that needs to be taught at a very young age. I'm not a parent, so I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it's something that has to happen at a young age. I know kids are already prone to say no, but I think that consent is something that needs to happen for sure. Just so that person knows that like they have personal agency, right? And they have that right of self-determination. Like, you know, if auntie wants to give you a hug, like, hey, like that person has the right to say no. And hopefully auntie doesn't get their feelings hurt. But consent. And I think that a lot of young people learn consent at a very, I would say, late age, because before you know it, like there's already been harm or injury that has happened, either physically or emotionally or verbally. And I think that a lot of harm and violence can be mitigated when there's that consent and that communication that already has a very strong foundation for sure. And that person knowing that they have that power of consent, right? And that's something that should be taught early on, that they have that power for sure. Substance use, whether it's partying or self-medicating, and those things can either be separate or together. I know for sure that when it comes to queer and trans youth, like sometimes those things mix as a way to either feel better about things that are happening in their life because they're trans, because they're queer, or just because they're a teenager, right? Like things happen, people want to explore. It's totally understandable. And it's kind of going along the lines of like consent and communication, childhood and adolescent trauma. I hear about that and see that a lot in my sessions with people who are not just LGBTQ youth, but also people who are just adults as well. Unpacking a lot of that has been kind of built up, whether it's just single events or whether it's complex trauma from their childhood, from their adolescence, from their young adult years. A lot of that comes out in therapy, and either that person has processed that or it's unprocessed trauma. And then another thing that comes up as well is suicidal thoughts, as Stephanie has mentioned already in the presentation. That's a really big one as well. And I know I talked about trauma already, but I want to talk about just sexual assault and how sexual assault has come up in sessions at different stages of a person's life. So I think those are kind of like the 4 to 5 big things that I see in therapy when it comes to people who are not just youth, but also adults as well in LGBTQ.
Yeah, those seem like they're spot on for those themes that are really overreaching in general there. And I'm sure if we can make an entire just session here about those themes as well.
Just communication alone.
Yeah, right, on just on one. Yeah. Thank you for that. Your responses were really well said and really well thought out. I really liked them. We are now going to, this is going to be our first question for all panelists here. And it's going to be, what mental health slash, oh, sorry, I was skipping one. What are some challenges that you or others you know have encountered when attempting to access mental health services? So this can go out to anyone here that wants to raise their hand on the panel. Yeah, like the question says, it doesn't have to be a situation that specifically happened to you. It could be something that you heard about or that a friend, you know, went through, something that you can share.
Mac?
Hi, can y'all hear me? Okay, something that I've personally dealt with while trying to go through just not even just finding therapy, but just services within my different things I deal with my mental health. For one, I've dealt with not being able to find a doctor that even takes my insurance, or that everything is just like cash, and the expense is far too high for something that I can't afford. Like, it doesn't take any of the things that I have. And that's pretty disheartening sometimes, because sometimes you're looking online and you find like the perfect therapist that helps with everything you need. But then the one issue is that the payment plan isn't what it needs to do. They can't accept what you have. Like, and that's really disheartening, as well as even if you do find a therapist or like anything that has to do with like resources, at some point maybe they stop taking your insurance and you have to stop seeing the therapist that you've gotten. That happened to me in high school. I had a very close relationship with my therapist, and multiple times my insurance was like, psych, no, this is not okay, and I'm going to take this from you because I don't want to pay for this anymore. And I find that so disheartening and just so disrespectful, especially when these services are there, but like we can't access them because of our insurance. And that's really disheartening. Or you find, I found a therapist once, but then we didn't mesh well, and it felt very like disingenuous to continue seeing them because it wasn't what I needed. And sometimes I felt guilty for even like for saying that, because I'm like, I finally found a therapist, and I went through this whole journey and I finally found someone, but I don't feel like I can connect with you. And having to be able to put my foot down and be like, okay, well, I can keep looking, but that's still disheartening because you went through this whole journey and you still have to do this all over again. So that's something that I've dealt with personally.
Mac, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm going to say that I agree too. So as Cleo was saying earlier about, affordability, accessibility, and like an affirming practice, like I feel like those are the things that we want ideally, but those were also all the challenges come in, right? So I feel like the biggest thing is, of course, cost for a lot of people that I know, and even in my own research, like just cost being one of the biggest barriers to why people don't actually get the help. And then also, right, the affirmation in that finding a culturally competent practice that's actually going to take into consideration like all your intersecting identities, like your socioeconomic background, like what oppression you have faced as an individual person, right, whether it's structural or whatever the case is. Like, I think that's a big deal too, and why we have to go through that dating process of finding and testing, and it does very much get exhausting. The last thing that I would say too is just like the stigma surrounding mental health care. I think like, and I can only speak to like for myself, and I imagine other communities of color too, but like this idea that searching and like looking for self-care is self-indulgent, right? To want to go out and actually help yourself and to unpack trauma and to actually like have those conversations. Like I know at least in my family, when I've talked to like, say my mom, for example, who, although we're very close, like when we talk about trauma, and we just have very different opinions on it. And for her as an immigrant woman from Southern America, it's very much like, oh, you just kind of get through it. Like, you don't really need to go to therapy. Like, I went through a lot of things in X, Y, and Z. And so obviously my approach growing up here is very different, but I think that also, it stops us from taking that step to actually seek the help. Cause we think, oh, maybe I can just power through this. Maybe I don't really need help. And sometimes that's not the case, so.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Randy. I completely agree, and Mac as well. Does any other panelists have something to add on this question? If not, I can move on to the next one. So for the next question for all the panelists, again, what mental health / wellness resources have you found especially valuable or meaningful in your community? Or it doesn't even have to be in person, online resources, anything like that, if anyone would like to share.
Okay, I'm gonna go. Hi, y'all. I wanted to touch on the fact that I had to start finding resources to help with my mental health within my community and finding very safe, queer spaces that helped me feel like I could be myself. And that's something that I feel really like confident in saying, because especially within community organizing, finding those spaces that I could, for one, have these conversations about my mental health and not feel like I was going to be stigmatized or like just, I don't even know, like discriminated against because of what the things I was going through and my identity at the same time. Like it was very like necessary for me to find very close-knit communities and also finding like organizations that gave resources without having to feel like I was I don't know, like I had to give them some part of my trauma to be able to have this resource from them, and being able to like actually exist without having to be like, I went through this and I need your help, and just immediately meeting organizations that are like, no, like you don't have to spill your trauma for me to be able to help you. And being able to find that in community was very, very like affirming and very heartwarming, because for one, it made me remember like, okay, well, if I can find these things, I can help others find these things. I can help others find these resources and these groups and these communities, because they're here. We just have a very hard time finding them because they're not like advertised to us in the way they need to be, or they're not shown to us in the way they need to be. And those are some things that like have genuinely helped me in my mental health journey.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Mac. Does anyone else have something to add to that? Any valuable resources or any valuable resources you found for your mental health / wellness?
I'll go. I saw a hand up, but no. Yeah, so I'd definitely say therapy is number one. And there's a stigma around therapy that I don't like, that therapy is for the weak or people that have issues. But I think the point is that we're trying to work through the issues. So that's how you become a better person. So the past year was, pretty wild, but I took that time. And I think a lot of people took time to like to give themselves like that self-care. So yeah, therapy is a big, huge one. I also kind of like got into meditation. So, a lot of, breathing exercises, like we saw, they're pretty effective, and then definitely like finding, so meditation and spirituality was a big factor for me. Whatever works for you, follow through. And I think another thing that I kind of like got connected was community. So, all these organizations just started popping up, I'm here. And I just found community and people that have my same, I'm not gonna say struggle, but same issue. And so it's just so cool. It's like, oh wow, you're trans, or you're this and that. And so you feel like at home, because it's like you find this common thing, and it's fun to, to talk to and be like, okay, I'm good. I'm unique. I'm great. So yeah, so those are the things that work for me. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Addie. Any of the other panelists have anything to add? If not, I can move on to the next question. Are y'all okay with that? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on and ask, in what ways have you or others found support at school that has benefited your mental health? This can be related to LGBTQ or not. I know that we have Randy here, not to put you on the spot, but QSA at school, how did that feel when you joined,
Yeah, So before I talk about QSA, I'll just take the time and hopefully not take up too much space, but to maybe talk about like resources even at like the younger age groups. So like within middle school, because seeing the data that Stefan presented, like I wish that kind of assessment had been done around the time that I was in middle school. So this was like 2006 to 2008. And I went to a middle school in the city of Watts. So it's kind of a, kind of a dangerous area. And so that's kind of like what was my experience, is that I feel like there was absolutely, and I don't exaggerate this, but like not a single resource for anybody who, about anything related to queerness. And this was 2006, 2008. So I feel like it was very isolating. It was very much like that experience of like not only being bullied, like all these awful things that I had to go through, but I feel like not being or feeling like there's actually any way out, like any person that you can talk to. There wasn't, at least from what I know, any openly identifying queer teacher or staff member or anything like that. And so I feel like at the age where I needed it the most, I didn't have it. So now I'm like stuck doing all the unpacking and learning and healing because all the trauma already took place, and that's fine. I mean, I feel like it's an ongoing journey, but of course, I feel like now as I've gotten older and, as I went through a lot of different high schools, but I did start to see more of those opportunities, more like high school GSAs. But really it was like college for me where I started to learn even more about those spaces. And so Cypress College has the Queer Straight Alliance. And I think that was like the first academic space that I had entered, like not just as a club, but like also like an academic / queer space. So yeah, I think that was extremely helpful for me too. And I think there's another question that talks a little bit more about like how we've seen society improve and everything. But I think definitely that's been helpful in finding community, right? Especially for me who like I was working full time and I quit working to come back to school. So like I think that was super integral in like me feeling not just safe, but like comfortable there and like actually feeling like there's other students who, even though we're navigating different experiences, like we have some similarities. So I think that's like the most important thing. So super grateful for them. And I know some of them are here today. So hi all.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Randy. Has anyone else on the panel found support in school that has benefited you?
Maybe Stephanie can go next.
So I've only been like technically in college for like a year, and then the pandemic hit. So I spent the majority of my second year, all my second year at home. So I didn't really get to join many clubs and like see if there are any like LGBTQ clubs. I did go to one meeting for one in my school, but I didn't really feel comfortable. I'm very like shy, and I have really bad anxiety, and like for me to meet people, it's very hard for me. I like to even talk or have a conversation, it's very hard for me. But once I started working for in the peer mentoring program that I worked for, it was great to like have this like organization that that has students talk to other students, like because sometimes when you have counselors at school, they don't completely understand you because they are not a student anymore, or they went to school a very long time ago. So once you get to talk to another peer or to another student, or maybe someone at the same age, it's like they understand you better and they are able to connect with you on like problems that you're going through like in school or university. So that's definitely one of them. I've also joined like other organizations that also get part of my identity, like as a Latina, but that also didn't really work out because although it is a majority like women dominated his Latinx club, there was no LGBT or mostly none, or like it was very disheartening because I really wanted to find like a community that kind of like overlapped my identities. And it's still like, it's a struggle, and I did make friends and people that are like willing to, or are like understanding of like my identity and willing to learn more. But yeah, I think like that's the only one I can think of, is like through my job, but I'm still looking. There's still hope. And I think like it's to have an open mind and to be able to just like join as much as you can in order to find the right community for you.
Yeah. Oh, Mac, you have something to say? Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say I found I'm going to answer this question from two sides of the coin, kind of like in the sense of just my mental health portion and have nothing to do with my sexuality. When I was going through a really bad depressive episode, or like depressive, dealing with my depression firsthand in like high school, I used to cling to my English teachers, or like I had this teacher and her name was Miss Sands, and she was just like very understanding all of the time. Like whenever I would come to school and I'd be very either emotionally distressed, she would always understand, and she would never overly question me. She would never overly ask questions about anything that I was going through, but she would very much also never pressure me she would pressure me to do my work, but she never made me feel bad if I couldn't get it done because of how I was feeling. And that was something that really supported me, because I felt like I could continue, like, at least, I don't even know, like thriving in school, even though, because she believed in the fact that I could keep thriving. Like she believed that even if I came to class and I was there every day, I could still do it. And that helped me believe in the fact that I could go to school every day, because I was like, I don't even want to be here. I'm too upset about this. But then I remember when I was going through coming to terms with the fact that I was queer in my senior year of high school, and GSA Network came to my high school. I went to PAL. If anyone knows where that is, it's in Long Beach. It's Pauly Satellite Campus. And it's a really small campus. So there wasn't very much like outwardly queer kids at that school. So when he came to the campus, he was trying to create a queer club, or like a GSA club at the school. And so there weren't that many kids that were out and wanted to be a part of this. He took the kids that were like, okay, I can do this. And he took us to LA every Saturday, or once a month for a weekend every Saturday. And that made me feel very affirmed, because I could meet other queer kids that were dealing with the same thing. Or like not even dealing with the same thing, but had the same experiences like Addie had talked about earlier. And that was really affirming for me, because I could exist in this space and I could be whoever I felt like I needed to be, or that I wanted to be in that time and in that space. And it was always so affirming and always so different, because I was always like, I don't have to keep presenting in a way that I have to present every other day of my life. On this weekend, this is my safety net. And that was very nice. And he's still one of my like very trusted mentors to this day. And he's the one that got me into a lot of my community organizing still. So like it definitely benefited my mental health. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much for that. And I see Addie's hand up.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. That was very nice. Thanks, Mac, for sharing. I'm glad for you. Just real quick, what was the question again?
It was, in what ways have you or others you know found support at school that has benefited your mental health?
Nice. Okay, so we're gonna throw it back to high school. I know when I was in high school, there was this cost-free counseling, so I took advantage of that. But you know, like we mentioned, they're not really like advertised. You know, you gotta like dig, you gotta find these resources. And then in college, they added, I don't know when they added it, but they added a counseling to the student resources. So as long as you pay that fee, the counselor is there. And yeah, I know they would be booked. You'd have to like book in advance. So definitely, you know, just look around, take advantage of these things, because you know, they're out there, but you just gotta do your research. So yeah, that was my experience, and definitely took advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And like you said, there's so much to take advantage of in college spaces. Check out the wellness centers, the health centers. You know, there's a lot of stuff that comes with that little $8 or whatever that you're paying, you know. Definitely. Alrighty. We can move on to the next question. So we'll go here. And it kind of also is going along with the school question in a way. Where have you found community, and what does community look like for you? Because I think surprisingly, community looks like very different for everyone, right? We all have different experiences with the community and what it looks like for us. So. Yes, Stephanie?
For me, community is kind of like I kind of describe it as the same as kind of like family, because for me, community, I built my own little small community like with my friends. That's my community, because we are built of we kind of make this joke that we all met our senior year of high school, and slowly throughout time, slowly, every one of our people around us start coming out. So it's like we all kind of like just like kind of unlike you didn't notice at the time, but like you just all started coming out, and like we just started building our community, and we are there for each other. We support each other, we listen to each other, we call each other like 12 a.m. sometimes just to be like, this happened to me, and like you wouldn't like believe like what I faced like at school today. Because we also like we're like in school spread out throughout California. So I have friends in Berkeley, I have friends in San Diego, I have friends here in LA. So we kind of just like spread out, but we keep that strong community force. We're there for each other, we support each other, and we listen to each other, which is like the three main things I think of when I hear community.
Thank you for that. And I think that's great. Having friends who you can relate to like that for anyone is really important, you know, especially when you move on from high school and get into this awkward stage of being in college and you don't really know a lot of people. And, you know, it's good to keep in touch with the people that you have known for a really long time. So our next question for all the panelists, and I think this one's going to be good. How have you seen society improve as a whole? So in parentheses, tolerance, acceptance, support, etc. And what does that mean for the LGBTQ community's mental health?
Hi, I didn't raise my hand. I hope that's fine. This question, I want to say society has definitely improved over the last few years, 100%. And not 100, I won't even actually say that, not 100%. But it definitely has improved, especially in the sense that we can be outwardly ourselves in some spaces, and not be fearful of being outwardly ourselves. And I think that the world has, I don't know if it's because that they realize that they can profit off of our identities, and that's why they're tolerable, and their acceptance, which is awful, like actually awful, and I wish that wasn't happening. But there's also certain spaces where it's definitely improved, and people are way more open and accepting, and also like considering enough to want to learn without feeling like we have to teach them, and they understand that it's their responsibility to want to learn, and their responsibility to, if they want to gain respect, they have to give respect. And that's something that I've personally like realized. And I think that that's something that helps LGBT mental health in the sense, because we don't have to spend all our time for one, come to terms with who we are as people, and then helping other people come to terms with who we are at the same time. We don't have to worry about educating them. Well, some people we don't have to worry about educating them while also trying to just figure out who we are as a person. So yeah, I hope that made sense actually. Okay.
No, yeah, that definitely made sense. And I really agree with you. And I see Addie's hand up over here.
Yeah, I love Mac's response. Society though has improved. I'd say like a 50-50. You know, there's still people that are like gonna ask you questions and make your life complicated. But you know, I think it's a process, just how I went through my gender identity. I think the people also need to like adapt to it. So it's normal for them to be like, oh, you know, messed up on your pronouns, or oh, this and that, and you know, so just, you know, be patient with that. But like, I think in professional settings, society is so much more affirming. Like if I'll go to even to the dentist, they'll use my preferred name, which is now my legal name now. So, but even before that, months before, thank you. Yeah, so even before that, you know, my old name, they wouldn't call me by my old name, so they would just, you know, call me by my preferred name, and I was like, how could they do this? You know, this is supposed to be a professional setting. You know, I was like, okay, and you know, they'll call me by my legal name. I'm sorry, the professional, like the medical centers, they would call me by my preferred name more than my family would. My family would call me by my old name, but it's fine. You know, it's fine. So yeah, society has, you know, and then there's more like entertainment, has, like Max said, I don't know if it's like profit or just kind of exposing that, like more trans representation and stuff like that. And so it's very nice. And I think even like I saw a commercial about was it MasterCard? They're doing that thing about the name too, so that you can change your name on the card so it can be more affirming, and you won't have to like feel, you know, weird about it. And then restrooms, gender neutral restrooms, they're always fun to go to because it's like, oh, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming up. It's little things, but it's so affirming, and it's so like a safe space. So whoever did all that, thank you for making us feel safe. And may they continue bringing more stuff like that, because it's, you know, so simple things, but it's super effective and very, very nice.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. You actually made me think of the recent Blue's Clues episode where they had the Pride parade, and it was so cute. I saw it all over Twitter, and they talk about, you know, some mommies and daddies, you know, look different, and some mommies are married to mommies, and some daddies are married to daddies, and you know, but everyone is having fun at the Pride parade, and it's like a little drag queen singing on the Blue's Clues episode. You guys should check it out. And I see Randy's hand up. Go ahead, Randy.
So I agree with what everyone shared. I think that's super valid and super true. Although I will just say, like, not playing devil's advocate, but I think also, like, maybe because I'm an anthro student, I don't know, but I feel like I see both parts in terms of like I look at it from like a biological and cultural standpoint, and I feel like things like tolerance, like support, like acceptance, like all those things, I feel like they're still like culturally relative to some point, you know, because I feel like some communities like have like moved and progressed way further than others because of the things that are taught within those specific subsets of communities, right? So like if I take like Latinx communities, for example, right? Like if I think of, for example, at least my family, like how they were raised and what they were brought up, like that has shifted tremendously, I think now, because, you know, my mom has had the luck of having a queer child, and you know, I've been able to educate her and like, you know, talk about those experiences with her. But I feel like had that not happened, like who's to say that, who would have done that work, you know, like those generational patterns would have continued onwards. And so of course, you know, we live in a pretty like liberal and progressive state of California, so I feel like in that context, like there are a lot of things that are progressed here. But I think also, like, at the same time, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done because, you know, and trigger warning, just 2020 alone had over 40 trans people who were murdered, you know, and who were mostly Black and brown women of the trans experience. So I feel like that alone goes to show that there's still some work that needs to be done. Of course, nothing's going to happen overnight. But I think that it's just, I feel like, of course, when we think to like Stonewall and like the advances in civil rights, like hell yeah, there's so much stuff that's taken place, like so much has changed, and I'm so privileged and grateful to be like navigating my queer experience in this day and age, because, you know, it was obviously a lot harder before, but I do think that just with anything, there's like always room for improvement, and I'm excited to see, because it takes, you know, folks like us and educating other people and calling people inwards to actually make that change. So
Thank you, Randy. I really enjoyed how you worded that. You're very good at explaining that.
Thank you.
Stephanie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so I actually thought the same as Randy. Like I was gonna say the exact same thing because I'm also part of the Latinx community. My parents are both immigrants and they're both from Mexico. So like growing up in the States, I live in South Central Los Angeles. So like if you've ever been to South Central Los Angeles, the majority of like the population here is Hispanic or Latinx. But I constantly see transphobia, homophobia, misgendered. My mom actually she has her own business, and she was telling me how she was my teammate in middle school, so we played basketball together, and she had recently came out and she was walking down the street with her girlfriend, and they were holding hands, but as soon as they kind of got close to a group of people, she just let go of her hand because she was scared. So that like just hearing that like breaks my heart. I was like, and I've been wanting to like, because I see her sometimes when I go and work at my mom's store, and I see her sometimes and I just want to be like, hey, like I'm also gay, but like if you ever need someone to talk to, I know like I'm not always here, but like you can like talk to me, and it's okay because I totally 100% understand. Like I sometimes am scared that if I do take my partner somewhere, I can't hold her hand because I'm scared someone's gonna say something or we're gonna get attacked, which is totally 100% like valid. Like I see why she did that, and like Randy said too, I don't know if my mom would have not really my mom but more my dad, because he actually grew up more of like my grandparents on my dad's side are more intolerable, so they don't really understand like LGBT community and queerness. So for him, when I came out, it was like a huge transition, and I don't know if he would have been able to make the change that he did have I not been queer or gay. So that's definitely like there's always room for improvement, especially within the Latinx community or any community of color.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for that. And now I'm going to give y'all the last question to all the panelists before we pass it back over to Blair for the conclusion of our panel today. So we're gonna end it on this positive note. I can't wait to hear what everyone says. What are strategies that have worked for you in maintaining your mental wellness? That's self-care, that's self-love, it's really important every day. Yes, Mac, I see that you have your hand up.
I like to meditate a lot. I also like to go roller skating and just being under the sun, being outside in the sun, allowing myself to just like actually be present in the fact that I'm, for one, not sitting in my head, and allowing myself to just exist in the present and know that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. That keeps me sane, actually, very much so. Also journaling. I'm a poet, and like being on stage and like performing also keeps me like very much like centered and being able to just like know who I am and where I am, and that's something that definitely keeps me grounded. And just being with friends, I think being in community, like I said that a lot today, but being in community where I can feel safe and I can express myself and just be able to again exist in the most affirming way possible is very comforting to me personally, because I like to laugh and all of my friends are really funny. So I think that that's really affirming for me. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. We love that for you. And now, Addie, I see your hand is up as well.
So I love this question because it's like, I was looking for it like back then when I was going through a difficult time. I was like, what is the key to be happy? Like, what do I do? Like, what do I got to do to be happy? So I think everyone's answer is different, but yeah, I recently, like I said, mentioned therapy. If I didn't mention it, it's very effective. Definitely just venting with someone and finding those resources from a professional is the best thing that you could do. And so you're not alone, you get referred to community, like these organizations like this, and then you just meet people within the LGBT community and even allies. So they could just be straight and cis, and they're just so great and affirming, and you make friends and socialize and go to, safe and affirming events. And then for me personally, I recently got into reading, then I started writing, journaling, and then I wanted to do I am doing, I'm working on a gender journey novel, just kind of like on pause on that. But yeah, just finding that passion really is the key. And so for everyone, it's different, and yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Yes, Stephanie, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, so for me, like again, like I said, I'm very shy, and it's very hard for me to like say things or know how to phrase them. So writing and journaling have like saved my life. I write almost, and then when it comes to more creative stuff like poetry and stuff like that, I don't do it every day because sometimes like I always say like creativity needs to come to me rather than me going to it. So I can spend like a good like couple months not writing anything because I just let kind of just all of that build up, and then finally I find my inspiration and I start writing. Also music. I love music. Like it's also saved my life. I listen to music every single day. I ride in my car and I blast whatever I'm feeling, whether it be I don't know, K-pop or Spanish music, anything that I'm feeling that day. Even if I just go get boba, I need to get my. It's like a 5-minute car ride, but it's like so peaceful, and I'm like singing in my car. Also reading, but I don't like reading like education sometimes, just because I leave that to school. Like let me like live, like when I am on my break, I read more like not like nonfiction, like stories of. I'm really into like romance novels right now. So that's like what I've been doing. And yeah, definitely like community. I hang out with my friends a lot. We're all vaccinated, of course, like being vaccinated and stuff like that. But I've been I've been seeing them a lot because again, they're like my support system. So I want to hang out with them every single day.
That's great. Thank you for sharing, Stephanie. And lastly, we have Randy.
So I'll just say for me, like what Addie was saying, he was mentioning how like it's different for everybody, right? Like what helps us. I think for me personally, and it's funny because it's like also the thing I struggle with a lot, but like I know how beneficial it is for me is just talking about my feelings. Like I realize that it's like I have this like problem where like I compartmentalize like different parts of my life, like work is work and school is school and this is this. So I feel like and I think maybe that comes with the sense of just wanting to like have control over like things in my life. But I feel like when I'm just able to just, be like radically vulnerable and just talk about the stuff that I'm going through, or like be around people that will make that space for you and you for them, and also like asking people like, hey, do you have space? Like, do you have the mental capacity to hear me out right now? Because we don't know what other people are going through either, And I also don't want to be that friend that's just always like I always try to be mindful of that. But I feel like that's been the biggest thing is just like, being honest with where I'm at and like honoring myself in that way. And if I need time to myself, like give myself that time. And then another thing also, which I feel like I've been neglecting, but like I know works for me is like my eating habits, like just eating healthier, I feel better. But obviously it's an ongoing journey. I have good days, I have bad days, but for sure, those are two things that I feel.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, I was agreeing with you, Randy, about the eating habits, and then I called on Cleo.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that a few things that I promote to my clients when it comes to mental wellness is just like for them to seek, locate, and embrace and cherish joy, like where they can, whether it's a good potato chip or some lemonade or a laugh or you know, being in the sun, like just whatever brings you joy, like living in that and embracing that can really, really help your mental health for sure. And, you know, like whenever you can, like promote definitely to practice gratitude. The things that you are able to do, right? Like whether it's you had a hard time getting out of bed, well, okay, maybe you were able to like have water, or maybe you watch something, or maybe you text someone. Like there's small things that people do that they can show gratitude to and honor that, right? And also like just be kind and compassionate towards yourself for things that you do, right? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of us do give compassion and kindness to other people and not as much to ourselves. So make sure that you give as much back, if not more, to yourself than others.
Yes, I love that. I think there is something to cherish in every day, and I think we often need to slow down. You know, we're always in a rush, and this rush to do things and feel this pressure that we always have to be doing something. Sometimes it's just nice to, like you said, enjoy a potato chip. Think about how good that bag of potato chips is, or how good it is to just lay in bed and stuff like that. Definitely. And now, thank you to everyone's response who responded. We really, really appreciate it. And now I'm going to hand it back off to Blair.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Also moved by everything that you shared, and just really appreciative of your bravery, of your vulnerability with us as you shared your answers tonight. So thank you. I'm going to post the survey link one more time in the chat. Again, if you could all do us the favor of filling this out, everyone who fills it out will receive an Amazon gift card for doing so. It takes 2 minutes. It's very quick, but again, it helps our program so much to receive more funding, to put on more events like this. So we appreciate your support in filling it out. But I just want to really thank everyone for being here tonight, and to all the panelists and Stephen as well for your presentation. I hope that everyone walked away with, well, yes, there are some disparities, there's a lot of resilience, and there's a lot of hope, and there are a lot of amazing resources. We can do better, we can have more, but there are some out there like APAIT. Thank you, Cleo, for representing your organization tonight, and for the services that you provide to this community. And so, yes, thank you, everyone. We're a minute out, but we'll stay on. And if there are any questions, we'll be here in the chat as well to answer any of those, and hopefully connect anyone to resources if they need it. So thank you all, and have a wonderful night.